Matthew Autry, and I am one of the student representatives of Fuller Filmmakers. And so on behalf of Fuller Filmmakers, Fuller Theological Seminary, the Brim Center, Real Spirituality, I am happy to welcome you to an evening with Eliot Rausch. So Fuller Filmmakers is made up of a community of people at Fuller who are pursuing filmmaking. And we often get asked by people outside this community, and sometimes a few within it, why filmmakers are at seminary. And I don't have any one answer that would fit for all of us, why we aren't pursuing our MFAs, but are instead getting MDivs or MATs or MFTs. But I think that when you look at Fuller, and you look at the driving forces in most of our lives who care about faith and who care about film, Fuller has built the corner market on the crossroads of those two things. Fuller has always been open to dialogue with culture, to being open to hear what the culture has to say, and as such, being only minutes from Los Angeles, it made sense that it would develop a robust relationship with the makers of our largest cultural product, right? Film. So Fuller's relationship with film has only grown since the founding of the Real Spirituality Initiative, which is part of the Brim Center. And we owe a big thanks for Real Spirituality for helping us put this event on. Thank you to Rob and Elijah and Joe and to Eugene for their consistent support in letting us have events like these. Speaking of events like these, November 7th, we're going to be watching Tree of Life, Terrence Malick's film, in Travis Auditorium. And we're going to have a talk back with some film critics and our very own Rob Johnston. Fuller and the Brim Center do more than just support film dialogue. They support filmmakers, and not with three-picture deals or any multi-million-dollar budgets, but instead by affirmation. The affirmation that filmmaking can be a vocation, that a Christian can be called to behind the camera or to the editing bay just as much as they can be called to stand behind the pulpit or to stand on the mission field. And no one embodies this for me better than Laura Lee, our moderator for this evening. You know, when I was an online student for over a year, I was really hungry for anything I could get my hands on about what Fuller was, the story of Fuller. And I actually came into contact with one of Laura Lee's products before I came into contact with her. I came to Fuller to visit, and I stayed at Fuller's lovely guest center. And there I found a copy of Fuller's Theology News and Notes, which Laura Lee has been the editor on forever until recently, and is now the editor of a brand new magazine, which we have in the lobby that you should grab on your way out if you didn't grab on your way in. But anyways, this particular issue of Theology News and Notes happened by providence for me to be focusing on theology and the arts. And so there in my guest center room, I shuffled through everything I could read about Fuller's understanding of theology and the arts, and I read these wonderful articles by people taking seriously something I'd longed to take seriously for so long. And Laura Lee had probably my favorite reading, probably because I lean most towards her, and you'll understand when she says this. I am neither theologian nor scholar. I do not speak with the authority of either. I am a filmmaker. We write stories, and then we embody them. Or to put it in an ancient way, we take the word and we incarnate it. I consider it a holy calling. Laura Lee goes on in that article to suggest that art making should be done out of love. And this is what makes Laura Lee's calling holy. I could stand up here and give you a long speech about all of Laura Lee's awards and filmmaking accomplishments, not the least of which is finally finishing principal photography on a film she's been shooting for years, Praying the Hours. But I would rather tell you that Laura Lee is kind on set and off. I would rather tell you that she meets for coffee with all of us who don't know what we're doing, trying to understand theology and film. I'd rather tell you that she's always there for those of us who find ourselves in this community. And I would rather tell you that she is the heart and soul of what Fuller Filmmakers strives to be. And so I'm very happy to have Laura Lee moderating our event with Eliot tonight. Eliot met Laura Lee for coffee before this, and he sent me an email. He sent all the Fuller Filmmaker leaders an email, and he said, Laura Lee is a saint, a real prophet. You're all so lucky to have one another. Just like Laura Lee, I first got to know Eliot through his work, and what a work it is. You know, the internet continues to change the possibilities for filmmakers. All of a sudden, global distribution is at our fingertips and no longer held by only the largest of corporations. And yet, the content of web videos seems to fall short of the depth that the medium offers. And it's not that I'm against cats playing the piano, but it seems to, in some ways, fall short of the ability of what internet and video can do. And I think that's why Eliot's films are so astonishing to me. That they're usually less than 5 minutes in length, but they're the rare exception in the goofy viral videos that dominate the online marketplace. They're stories of heartbreak and loss, struggle and despair, and certainly not least, they're tales of hope. It's no surprise to me that Eliot's film, Last Minutes with Odin, won the Best Video of the Year at the inaugural Vimeo Awards in 2010, even though the 6-minute documentary was competing with much bigger films with much bigger budgets. Because I think the movie does the best of what online video can do. In a short amount of time, the space of time that I may take between checking my emails and updating my status, I'm invited into someone else's life. I'm given a few brief moments into someone else's shoes. And such a video can break down the walls that I put up between myself and others. And such a video can actually question and take away the power of the online marketplace that says that I should create a narrative where I am the star, that I should put forth an image of my strongest moments. I could tell you about Eliot's success as a filmmaker, but to do so would actually be to cut against the point of most of his movies. And so I'd rather tell you that Eliot is a good friend, a caring brother, and a humble sinner. You know, I met both Eliot and Laura Lee through their work before I met them. But in coming to know them, I've come to learn that people are better than products, and people are more than the products that they make. Our culture tries to judge us by what we make, but there's a better way. You know, the gospel is not a product. It's news. It's good news. It's the best of news, and it's a story, and it's the best story. It's a story about people at the margins of society that find themselves invited into the center of a kingdom. And that's actually why I'm so excited to watch Eliot's films tonight, because I think that they do exactly that. So we're going to have the films playing, and we're actually going to watch films, and then Laura Lee and Eliot are going to come up, and they're going to dialogue some around each movie. And during that time, if you have a specific question about that particular film, then we invite you to come to the microphones right there and ask your question if it's about that specific film. But just know that in the interest of time, we're probably going to take one or maybe two questions in between each film. So all that said, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to watch Eliot's movies, and that's going to be the night. So let's pray. Dear God, thank you for art. Thank you for film. Thank you for the fact that you are involved in every portion of life, and that we can find you in the movie theater just like we can find you in the cathedral. And so I pray tonight as we watch stories of people that we see your light shining through them, that we see the sacredness of all life pervading every single corner of the frame. God, give us eyes to see and ears to hear. In your name I pray. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, Laura Lee Farrer and Eliot Rausch.
Well, hello. Oh, this makes it so much easier. I can't actually see any of you. So a couple of things I want to say before we talk about this. One is, as we were talking before we came in, this is a place where it is sort of the nexus of faith or theology and filmmaking. So I'm going to try to steer the conversation in that direction, because this is one of the few places where that conversation would be had. If your interest is in, what kind of camera did he use or whatever, maybe that's something that you can ask afterward. But I want to urge you to think of questions that help us to stay attached to the way you feel after watching the film, because it's the hardest thing to stay attached to, is the humanity that is in there. And your gift is displayed in the fact that you were able to see it. We're going to talk a lot about that, I hope, is how do you see? And then how do you train yourself to see that way, so that now you see what you didn't before. So there's that. And then the other thing I want to say about you, my dear, and I hope you don't mind listening in while I talk about you. Eliot and I met one time, and as my mother used to say, my mother was a person of prayer. So she was that person who people would call and say, Betty, will you pray for my husband? Betty, will you pray that the baby will be born okay? So she was that person. 8 hours a day she spent in prayer. And when I was young, I used to hear her say things like, she'd meet somebody in line at the grocery store, and she would say that person went into her heart. And I knew that she would pray every day, sometimes 8, 10 years for that person, never seeing them again. I hope that won't be exactly the case with us, but when I met you that day, as I said to you before I left, you went into my heart then, and so now I feel like I carry you. And I'm saying that to you now, and I'm saying it also publicly, because I also want to remember that and give it weight. So do you want to say something about Last Minutes with Odin? Yeah. Wouldn't you know I just screw up the title of the thing. I got it, though. Do you want to say something about this or the making of it, and we can open to a question or two?
Sure. Thank you all for coming out. You didn't have to do this. Last Minutes with Odin, it's been a real tough film, because it did win the Vimeo Film Festival, and it did help with sort of launching my commercial career. And I've been asked on the other side of that film to talk about the act structure and the narrative through line and how I picked this kind of protagonist. And it's been really tough, because I was sitting in an edit bay, and I was about 2 years sober, and I was literally showing up every day, filling in for another guy who had actually stepped out because of some struggle with alcohol. And every morning I was just praying, God, thank you for giving me my life back, and I'm just happy to serve wherever you want me. And a friend of mine came into that room, into the edit bay, and said, hey, I just bought a new camera. It's a 7D DSLR camera. If you want to use it on anything, you're welcome to. And 20 minutes later, my dear friend, Jason, who's in the film, who literally was kind of like my Eskimo in sobriety, really pulled me out of a lot of my pride and my ego, and really got me to understand beauty in authenticity and sort of beauty in brokenness. He was I was following him around almost as like kind of a savior type of figure. He called me and said, I'm putting my dog down. Will you be with me? And so I just put two and two together and asked Woody, I said, can we bring a camera and just capture it just in case it's something we can remember Odin by? And so the next day, literally, it was raining, and the guys were like, dude, we can't shoot, it's raining. And I said, we've got to do it for Odin, and hop in the back of my trunk, and I'll pay for whatever gets damaged. And so it was a 2-hour period. I interviewed him after he put his dog down, literally like 20 minutes after he put his dog down. I went home that night, cut it together in about 2 hours, and I think emailed it to my mom or something, because I wanted to, I wanted to show her what happened to Odin. And overnight, I think it was like 40 or 50,000 views, and it kept growing, and it gained all this recognition, but it was never supposed to be that kind of film. It was just a little private, it was just honoring my friend who I love dearly, honoring his dog, and just doing what was right in front of me. So it's been challenging because people break it down. They're talking about the ways things were edited and how it was put together, and it's a complete accident,
Well, yes and no. You wanted your mom to know what happened to Odin. And so what you did was you did something out of your heart and in order to show somebody else. So to break it down and figure out what the structure is okay for filmmaking school, I guess, or whatever, but misses the point in the context of the piece itself. And respect for Odin and for those that whose story that you told. So do we have any questions for this, or should we go on? I think we have 4 or 5 films we're going to do.
So I've seen this film several times, and it still affects me every time. And I was wondering, I could see how a commercial person might want to turn this into a marketing for brand. Yeah, you say so focused to your own values, and I wonder how you navigate that going forward as you work with brands, and how you stay true to your own values.
Well, my commercial rep, the guy that owns the production company, is sitting up there in the corner, and his name's Preston Lee. Look at him, and he's wearing a hat. So
Welcome, Preston.
Preston has been a saving grace in my life. He came alongside me 4.5 years ago when the film launched, and he's walked me through that space, the commercial space, as a father. And I would be lying if I didn't say I was calling him every day, cussing out projects and losing my mind and feeling like I'm selling out and being violated on set and wanting to come home, and he's maintained, as a mentor, he's maintained a relationship with me and helped me sort of navigate that world. But it's been very challenging, very challenging to take a film like this and then enter advertising and talk about why it's marketable, or how I can make a certain commercial that's similar to this kind of emotion, and they're looking for the same kind of tears and reaction this evokes. So it's a tough line to walk.
Shall we keep watching? Let's do that. Where did that come from?
This is another accident. A dear friend of mine, Brian, who was also in recovery with me, and he was at my house one day, and I asked him to sit across from me in a chair and listen to the voices in his head. And I had a friend of mine who was a camera operator, who afterwards was like shaking and wanted to leave the house. He was petrified, and then afterwards, I took that moment and just recorded different voices that I thought he might be hearing, and created that little film. But yeah, it was pretty strange, and you'll see in the next film too. Brian's been someone that has faced a whole bunch of stuff in his life and continues to pursue his faith, and he struggles with his sobriety and is really trying to always tread water, and just keep his head above water. And he's just a huge inspiration. I think in the next film it's probably more explicit what his life actually looks like. But yeah.
Okay, so before we move on, so back up one step, and how did it occur to you to ask him to do that?
There was a church that had asked me to do a video for Easter, the Garden Church in Long Beach, and I want to say the theme was the prodigal son, and I'd always seen Brian as kind of the prodigal son, and so I guess I was curious what the inner dialogue of the prodigal son would be previous to him repenting and turning back to Papa's house, you know? Yeah. So...
So you were working on that in your mind already, and something, somewhere along the line, clicked. That's the guy. What would that be like? And let's do it. And God bless him. He said yes. Yeah. Right. Any questions on this one, or should we go to the next? Elijah?
That's beautiful and haunting, and I feel a lot of things right now.
Really, Elijah? Why?
Yeah, go figure. Thank you. I'm curious about, you called it an accident, I guess, and I see a lot of really good craft work in the film too. And so, could you talk a little bit about the decision to have it go more out of focus the louder the voice is God? And when he hears from God, you don't hear God's voice. There's silence there in place of all the voices. And things like that seem really, those things hit me as strong as what he's saying, you know? Yeah. How did you make those decisions?
Yeah, I really didn't. I mean, I know. You want the 5-point model to a better, successful film.
No, I really don't want that at all. No, I don't want that at all.
But you see intention there that seems like it's...
where's that coming from? What's the thought behind it? If I was doing that, my inclination would be to have God's voice speak in too, not to have silence. Or to do the... I don't know, the quality of the focus pulling was different than what I would normally expect, kind of. So I feel like there must be, I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the focus, obviously, I think we had a DSLR camera that was just locked in a position, and Brian was nodding, you know, as he was probably encountering some of his own demons. And as far as the silence goes with hearing from God, I don't know. Some of these films, you know, in post when I'm cutting them together, it's kind of an instinctual thing. And I think at one point I had a voice in there, and I felt like it just worked better without a voice.
It rings true to me, because in my moments where I've been the most in turmoil and like crying out for God to help that, and God is silent in that moment. For a long time, that was really frustrating to me, and it made me angrier at God because God was silent in that moment. And then over the years, I kind of learned that God's silence, I can hear that as peace, and not just as distance or ignorance, I guess. And that, thank you. You got
Thank
that,
you.
whether
Yeah.
it was on purpose or not, you got it.
No, I mean, to me, that's the biggest joy is being able to present something like this and then hear that interpretation. And now I'll walk away having a different experience with the film because of your interpretation. So it's really awesome. It's awesome to see, I mean, to hear that, because I think it's probably my experience as well, you know. But I did this maybe 4 years ago, so I think it was just, it was more instinctual.
Well, your instinctive experience. You knew whenever he started moving. You must have felt when you saw it, yeah, oh, wow, that works, you know. So whether you intended it or not, that's what I think becomes transcendent for a filmmaker, is to stand in the back of a theater like this, watch something that there's not a frame up there that you didn't make happen, and yet if you feel transcendence the same way the audience does, something really unusual has happened. So that's what you're going for. I mean, that's what you hope for. So let's go on. Where'd the text come from?
So Darren, raise your hand. So Darren had given that sermon, and I was at a place in my own sort of faith walk where I had been really burned by the evangelical church and sort of the prosperity gospel, and I was about to, I think, walk away from my faith. And I was sitting in a bar in Long Beach, and this really good-looking, skinny dude was preaching. he was preaching the gospel in a really weird way. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like sort of the Jesus I know. It's like the Jesus for those that are really on the margins of this world, and that's the Jesus I know. And so I stole the audio file the next day from the church, because I was never going to go back to church anyways. So.
You noticed that shift that just took place right there? You just went like this. So anyway, Darren, how do you feel about that?
And at the same time, it was probably the day before, I was helping Brian move from his wife's father's house to Compton, into that room there that was on top of a auto body shop. And for me,
linoleum room.
and it just smelled horrible in there. And they were freaking out because they had a new child, and he had another son, and they were going to have to sleep in there that night. And so for me, it was a bit of a paradox. It was like, here he's talking about God, and he's like, going to spend the night sleeping on that floor, without any furniture. I just heard that sermon. I think it was just a film. There wasn't any real intention. It was just these two radical experiences that I had, and I tried to somehow merge them and make sense of. I think it was at a point where I was trying to make sense of faith myself.
So it feels a little bit like a theme to me, if you'll forgive me for trying to find one, of you saying, that was really an accident, and that was an accident, and then here are these two things that it occurred to me that if I put them together, this would happen. And it's not necessary to be able to put words to your process, but it becomes clearer after you're watching the films. Oh, this is the way he sees. He just sees the world this way. And that's unique to you, and yet I feel, as an audience member, I feel like I want to comment on that and say how remarkable it is, how clean it is, how much you are out of the way of your own work. And that's very hard to do. And for what it's worth, when I heard the litany of the kingdom is for, let me know if any of you felt the same way. I felt like I hope I find myself in the list. I found myself wanting to be in that company because it resonated so much. And when I did, I felt relieved. Like, oh, thank God, I was in there. I hope it wasn't just, everybody's out on the margins where they should be, and I'm somewhere in the center, by myself here. So anyway, thank you for the film, and thank you for the inspiration that prompted it. And that was your voice, right? Well, that was the audio file that you stole. Didn't I hear that part? Had to bring that up again, didn't I? Sorry, I just forgot. Any question before we go on to the next one? I feel a little like a bad Oprah at the moment. I gotta be going up and
my name is Annalise, and I really appreciate your films. There's something very elegant about it, how they're just it's like a little, you make a very tiny world very large, and I really appreciate that as an artist. And what I like, especially with even The Prodigal Son and this one, especially, and even the first one, what's elegant about it is the fact that even the way they, I guess, are so natural and authentic in the way they express their situation and how they're doing it. I find myself, even though I am nowhere near that situation, I find myself like agreeing with everything, and even a lot of things, even in The Prodigal Son, which resonated a lot because I've had those moments, even though I wasn't in the same situation, where you're just in the secret place, you're just crying out to God and trying to silence all the voices. And what my question is because it's so authentic, what's your process in editing? Because I'm sure, because it's so authentic, was there things you cut out on purpose? Things that maybe were too personal, or like how did that process come that you wanted to make a message, but was there any, especially as a Christian, we have limits, of what we can show, and did you take that into consideration, or did you want to, throw everything out there that was real and raw? So, yeah.
Thank you for the compliment, and firstly, I just want to say I think I'm a big believer that, Brian may have tattoos and he may be living poor, but I'm a big believer he touches a part of our soul because, if we can be honest enough, like we are Brian in many ways, it's just that he doesn't have any attachment. He has nothing to show. He has nothing to hold on to. He has no pretense, no reason to impress anyone. And it's the same thing with last mention with Odin and Jason. And the gift for me is, walking with those kind of men who don't have to prove anything. There's no agenda. When they experience God or they experience struggle, it comes out of them in the purest way. And for me, it's the incredible gift because I spend a lot of time with people that have a hard time communicating what's really within their heart, and it just flows out of them. And as far as the editing process goes, I sort of intentionally created these series of films hoping that churches wouldn't pick them up, hoping that they wouldn't be embraced. And I was approached many times by churches asking me to take out the curse words out of certain films so they could show them at the church, and I refused to do so, just because it wasn't sort of the point. The point was to be as honest and true to my subject and to honor them in a light without any agenda. I think where it does become difficult is exposing that vulnerability and exposing that sacred space that they've allowed me into. I think that's the line that I'm always struggling with, because after the film launches and there's hundreds of thousands of views and someone's giving me credit for doing something spectacular and they're still living in poverty, it's a horrible sort of situation to be in. And that tension's, it's part of the reason I sort of got into more scripted stuff in the past couple of years, is because that doc world, I don't know. I get too close to the subject matter, so it's risky.
And also somebody's giving you their story. Yeah. It's a sacred thing. And then to see where it goes and to know you don't have control over it. And those are really challenging circumstances to be able to stay true to them, to the story, to your own vision of it. Thank you for your question. Let's go on. Okay, so now we're seeing again this idea of the overlaying of two things, two kind of an unexpected pairing of this text and the footage that you paired with it. So just as a way to try to get my mind around it as a filmmaker, what did you start with? Did you start with footage? Did you start with text? Did you illustrate the text, or were you thinking that way? And why in the first place? Why this?
So I was having an experience in Alcoholics Anonymous where people were at the bottom of their life. They had sort of bottomed out. They had nothing left in themselves. They were empty of their own resources. And they were having encounters with God that were supernaturally rebuilding and regenerating their entire being in life. But it came from, this sort of understanding of their extreme poverty of spirit. That came from an understanding that they had reached the end of themselves in some ways. And so the blessed are the poor, that whole idea coming from, I think, more of an evangelical prosperity-driven gospel. It was something I began to experience. I was experiencing people like on their last dime having mystical encounters with the divine, and so that scripture was challenging me, and I was trying to understand its context, and so I just literally, it was one day, and I rented a camera and asked a friend to come with me through Los Angeles and Long Beach, and I just wanted to find those moments, or find at least splices of those moments that might point towards this truth. And then on the back end asked my spiritual father, Father Michael Curry, who's here today, to read.
Have him raise his hand.
Father.
Where is he? Hello.
He
Fuller grad.
Yeah, we had I had him do the voiceover, I think the next day, and then
It was lovely, by the way. I still can't see him, but I'm sure you're out there, like the Holy
He's
Spirit.
available for
or
voiceover
something.
work, by the way.
Especially if it's the Holy Spirit. 'Cause hello. Too far, as usual. Too far. Okay. Well, I just lost this gig, didn't I? Okay. So this is one that you shot without the permission, because I'm really aware of what those people gave you in the first few films that we saw. That's sobering to the point of, it goes deep in me to think of what they gave you and then what you are holding for them and their willingness, like that shot at the beginning in the first film. What's the gentleman's name who lost the dog?
Jason Wood.
Jason. When they were putting the dog down, remember how he got out of the chair? He got down on his knees. That wasn't close enough. He kept getting lower and lower and lower because he needed to get his face right next to the dog. That just knocked me out. Both the happening of it and the fact that he gave that to you in the sense he was totally unaware of you and he didn't care about you at that point, but he gave that to you anyway, right? So in this last one, there were like found moments, right? You didn't see it coming. So some part of you must have known, I know that I can go and find what's in my mind for this.
And some of them were literally, it was like the woman on the edge of the bed was a friend of Jason Wood's wife who was just staying over at the time. And I threw the DP into the bed, asked him to get naked, and lay on his stomach. And had her...
The way you do. So you guys are laughing, but every single time.
Yeah. And had her sit on the edge of the bed and sort of asked her to go to a place, in her own psyche as I captured the moment there. So it was a bit of a, there was some definite moments you can see there that we were driving by and stealing those things without permission at all. And then other moments that were being twisted and recreated just a touch.
Do you feel, so I feel when I'm watching that you have a confidence that the stories that you're looking for, you stop me if you feel like I'm putting words to something that you don't feel, because nobody needs to go there. But I feel like you have a confidence that you're going to find this human thing that you know is in everybody. And that you're confident enough about that you can just go in wherever it is. It's the DP, the naked DP in the bed, and have the girl sit on the edge of the bed, right? Who thinks of that, by the way? Eliot, what the heck? No.
A sinner.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and saint, as they said earlier. So that's on tape, my friend. So tape. That's how old I am. Let's just pause for a moment at that gaffe. So much for being right on top of it. Okay, no, seriously though, folks. Why are you so sure about that? Do you remember when I was? Okay.
So it's been my experience that it's a very mystical experience for me, and usually what happens is I'll feel something sort of stirring in my heart, and it'll keep me up at night, and it won't let go of me, and so the thinking is I'm going to go step out into a scenario or a situation that in some ways embodies this torment, and make myself available to that experience, that relationship, that moment, and hope that God meets me there in between. And for the most part in the past, I'd say, 6 years, it's been the case about 80% of the time. And the thing that I'm most intrigued by, and I'm working on a film right now. A young woman is battling cancer, and her boyfriend is trying to walk with her, through it, but he's really struggling. And so I was watching them from afar for weeks, almost a couple of months, and because of my own fears about being vulnerable to my own wife and knowing that she could potentially get sick, and so I was petrified that could actually happen to a relationship, and so I'm in the midst of creating a film with them. I'm not sure where it'll go, but it has already answered like my prayer, and it's already answered many questions. And the instinct is always that there's always resurrection. There's an undercurrent of resurrection within all of that suffering. It's not the end of the story, And that I know more than anything today. So when I approach subject matter or films in moments like this, I guess it's no longer a hope. It's, I'm meeting them within this tension, within this pain, within this struggle, knowing that there is a third act to the story. It maybe hasn't happened yet.
So what you feel in the story that you're working on right now, you are petrified of something. Yeah. So your instinct, anyone's instinct normally would be to avoid that, right? But you were saying that this kind of thing keeps you up. Once you start seeing it in your head, then it sort of tyrannizes you. That wasn't the word you used, but that sounds about right, yeah. So now you're caught between a rock and a hard place. So you're caught between extreme fear and I can't do it and I can't not do it, right? So there is something, that for me this scenario is generating for me a really lovely view of faith for the artist, which is the tyranny of I can't not do it, and the terror of doing it, and this narrow little strip in between of I know that I know that I know my Redeemer liveth, if I may put that to it. Nice.
True story.
Any questions for this, or should we go to the next one?
Hi, my name is Dama. It's like so many elements, especially in the last film, like the scenes that jump from different places. And I was wondering, how do you wrestle with, I guess you could call it wrestle, how do you wrestle with the idea of what is sacred and what is secular? Because I feel like it's important to deconstruct that fact, because you can find God in so many things, which you are finding God in so many things and so many people. So has there ever been like a battle for you trying to define what's sacred and what is secular?
Yeah, beautiful question. I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but
not here.
But there's moments that God speaks more clearly through an atheist than he does a Christian in my life, and there's moments when devastating struggle and pain that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy is a better teacher than the greatest moment in my life. And so my life is, I guess, it always feels like it's a living paradox, And so today I can honestly say I feel like God is working in and through all things. And I could be totally off theologically and get in trouble for that. But yeah, I guess there's no divide for me. So when there's like films and opportunities that I'm approaching, and someone asks, "Well, do you want to do a secular film or a Christian film?" Yeah, for me, there's no real sort of divide.
And also one more thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. So you say like this accident, which you keep saying, but I think, and this is what I personally feel through your film, I think it's prophetic, because it's not just the accident. You happen upon it, but it was supposed to be there. So it's like prophetic. You're just stepping into the prophetic of what God has already laid there. So it's all written in the plan. It's just that, you had that stirring, but that stirring led to what this was, which was supposed to happen in the first place. So that's just my piece.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, very great observation. We talked that day whenever we had lunch, that word came up a lot, prophet, for both of us, and feeling like in the Old Testament, the prophets were there to speak the hard word, to speak the truth into a community that didn't want to hear the truth that way. So anyway, well observed. That was lovely. Let's watch the next one. So, again, where'd this come from?
So this was really a little different because Jason was, It's similar in many ways because he was a father to 3 kids and was he's been going after his fighting career as sort of his main thing, working side jobs to get there, and he's just had a really tough time with it. And I've always, as an artist, I've had this pain, not knowing how I'm going to be able to facilitate, family life and pursue this love that I have for my craft. And I've always watched Jason out of the corner of my eye because it's like, here's a guy that's not only like pursuing what he loves, but he's getting his ass kicked, he's losing. He fell into, a lot of, I think, alcoholism just because of his own struggles trying to maintain everything and trying to balance family and his fighting career. And I had no clue if this fight was going to, he was, I think he was on like a five fight losing streak. And so this was basically a fight that was going to be, his way of knowing whether or not to pursue fighting ever again. And more than anything, I think I just wanted to embrace that moment of transition in his life and give him back something, just in case he were to win. And if he didn't win, I'd scrap the footage and hide it somewhere. But
Or show it in a church.
oh, sure, yeah,
Where
sure.
it didn't make a difference. So I'm curious, has he seen this and the guys that are in the previous films? Have they seen them, and what kind of responses do they have?
He has, yeah. I think they're all pretty. I think it's different for each one of them. Like Woody had a real hard time with Last Minutes with Odin, because he was still struggling financially at the time while my career was taking off, and it was really hard for him to understand what he got out of that film, rightfully so. And Brian's been a little more gentle. Jason was someone I think actually helped him in many ways. So I think he ended up pushing it out there because he was trying to find more fights and generate more of a buzz for himself. So it was a tool for him to actually use. I think he was happy about it.
Well, it's all tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any questions on this one? Yes, sir. Oh, hi.
Hey, Elliot. The first film of yours I saw was the Last Minutes with Odin, and I didn't know anything about you, and I was like, this is really great. It seemed documentary to me. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's an actual thing that happened. I know sometimes people will make fictional stories now and frame them as though they are documentary. I guess that's a thing now. But it seems like you use a lot of real stories in your work. My question is, does that add value to it, to use real people's stories as opposed to writing a script and telling a story about a guy who has to put his dog down or a guy who has to, in his fighting career? And if so, if it does bring value, can you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because the characters that I'm now fascinated with are becoming a little more fictionalized, and many times I'm trying to place a certain kind of idealistic hero onto some of these people that I'm documenting, and the story isn't long enough or there isn't enough depth to really go there. And so I'm not sure which resonates better, and I don't think these are necessarily like good stories. I just think they're splices of life, and they're moments of access into sort of this portal of their world. I don't necessarily think it's good storytelling, and I think a fictionalized narrative can be a much better story, and you can be much more clever, as you're writing the story.
I'm not nodding.
I know.
Because I think that we would part company on this. I do think they're stories. I do think you have an instinct for a beginning, a middle, and an end, and as prosaic as that may sound, stories reverberate with us, and so we tell them so naturally that that's why they've become something that we do artificially as well. But you have a clear instinct for doing it and for knowing when something starts and when it builds to its important moment and then when it's done. So I would say that it's in there whether you intend for it to be in there or not. But anyway, so yes on both counts. Plus I've seen what's coming next, so I know you can, you have an instinct for it in both narrative and documentary. So that comes with you as a filmmaker, not with the genre, right? So, welcome. Hello. Oh, hello, Tawana. Good. I'm okay, but I don't know. We won't talk about it now. I'll talk about it later.
Okay, absolutely. First of all, thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for having him. It's a comment, it's not a question. You had mentioned that the stories that you're sharing, there's an authenticity and there's a pureness with which those stories flow. And I'm just here to tell you that as a viewer of your films, as a filmmaker, there's purity that flows from what you do. And I thank you for giving us a glimpse into that worldview and sharing your lens with us, and especially the mystic side. You know all about that. But thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, yeah. Thank you.
We agree. We have one more. Is it one more? Okay. Do you want to ask your question now? Watch the next one. Go ahead.
These films all seem like prayers. And there's a lot of guilt in them.
I think it comes from my Greek heritage.
What just happened there?
Yeah, I think they're the intersect of like my disbelief and my pain, and then trying to meet God in the midst of the process of creating. So I think in many ways the act of actually creating these films is in many ways my hope to touch the divine,
Well put, by the way. Let's watch the last one, and then we'll prepare your Uber questions, because we'll be asking them then. Okay, so this was very different than the other films. A narrative, more of a narrative piece. Where'd it come from? Where'd you find the text, and did you start with that, or just give a little bit of your journey? Why? What resonated for you? Why did you want to do this?
So I'll try to make it quick because it's really hard for me to process what's happened these past 2 years. But about 2 years ago, I went to a therapist and I said, at the height of my career, I've lost my passion, I've lost my joy, I've lost. I just feel like it's a consistent beat of indifference, not feeling anything. And he was, a secular therapist, and he said. He gave me some word to look up in Greek, but he says it sounds like you've lost your enthusiasm or your passion. And the root word of that is to be possessed by God. It sounds like you're not possessed by God anymore. I thought, oh God, that's weird. And I knew it touched me deep at my core because I knew at the height of my sort of commercial career, at least a really big year where I was working a ton and had sort of lost my faith. It was still there in the background, but it wasn't the forefront of my life. I knew it to be true, and I was shortly thereafter. I, invited into the St. Ignatius spiritual exercises, which was an hour a day of meditation with God, and it was a year of working hard and meditating and sort of opening myself up to God again, And to just go back a couple of years, the 12 steps are really intended to puncture the ego and to kill you in some ways, so you can be like born again and you can die to that old egotist, the ego that's sort of living and keeping you in that addiction. It's intended to strip you. And I didn't, through the 12 steps, I didn't allow myself to be fully stripped. And so I finished the St. Ignatius exercises in January and still had a lot of attachments to my vocation, my career, my wife, things that I was holding on to keep myself feeling okay. And what happened was January, February, March, I began to lose jobs, one after the other. My wife went back to college, and I was sitting there with myself for the first time in a long time, and I had nothing to hold on to. And I entered a depression that's probably unlike anything I've ever experienced. And this is a really long-winded explanation, but I entered a season of like such utter despair, panic attacks, and horrible, just devastating depression. I could barely sort of leave my house. And in the midst of trying to figure out what was going on, my spiritual director was kind of like, "This is part of it. You have to let the process sort of like work through you. This is what happens after you've had a really long time with meditation with God, and you've opened yourself up, and the false self is kind of exposed." So I didn't realize it, but in many ways, my false self was dying. And this poem literally came to me in a book. It was a book by Richard Rohr. I think it was Breathing Underwater. And it so resonated because I think my whole life I've built up this castle of confidence and structure and knowing. And in one fell swoop, it was sort of washed away. And I thought it was washed away by despair and anxiety and a career that had sort of plummeted, but it really was the grace of God that began to invade me despite my best intentions and overtake my being and really like clean shop, And so all of my shadow self and the crap that I had deep within me since childhood began to come up, and I had to look at it and face it day after day. And so this film was trying to understand that process, trying to work through what I had experienced, trying to put some kind of film together that I could come back to and sort of remember what that was like. And
so it strikes me in a way that you did with this last film what your other subjects did in the previous films, meaning they gave you a story, and in this case you took something of your own, and so something about making those other films made it possible for you to take that same kind of risk. When we had coffee that one day, you said something like, "I don't know what it is about people on the margins that interests me. Like, they interest me and other people don't. Making films about other people that are not there doesn't interest you as much." And it seems to me that seeing them in a row like this, as I did last night, and then also watching them again now, at least one of the things that interests you is the fact that they are permeable, that they're unprotected, and that you have a desire for that. And we do, watching it. It feels like there's an honesty there that we're drawn to. And that's why the work is powerful, because it acts in a kind of intercessory way for us, and we're able to see somebody who courageously is able to say, "Here's my story," and then it feels as if, and so that happened for you too, right? So that you were able to do that in this last one. Anyway, so thank you for your willingness to put yourself in that last piece. And by the way, it's not easy to move from documentary to narrative like that and still maintain the same. I think one of our questioners, I forgot your name, sorry, but mentioned it as an elegance of your work, to still maintain that kind of accessible elegance. So well done. And I know this kind of thing gets said in environments like this a lot, but as I was watching, I thought, I cannot wait to see what comes next. Do you have a desire to do long form?
I do, but I think, and Preston's here, and he'll attest to it. Preston's always like, in my corner with it. I think.
Guy in the hat?
Yeah.
Is that Preston? Not that guy in the hat. That's Nate.
Yeah, I just don't feel qualified. I don't feel like I'm there yet in my talent or in my understanding of story, and so I think I'm slowly approaching it privately, hoping that no one finds out that I'm actually a hack.
Oops. Too late that everybody found out that, right. You're thinking about that. We'll talk about that later. So, questions on the whole experience of seeing the films uniquely in this way, one after the other, or, just anything that's on your minds.
I was hoping you could talk a little bit about how you understand what you do. At Fuller, we talk about vocation a lot. Like, what is your vocation? How do you understand your vocation as a filmmaker?
So I guess what I long more than anything is to see, resurrection in people's lives. I like to see people find their true identity and come awake to reality, And so, for me, whether I'm walking alongside of another alcoholic, taking them through the 12 steps, or I'm engaging someone and having the opportunity to walk alongside of them as they sort of resurrect, it fulfills the same sort of desire. And so my films are always, I think, trying to do the same thing. And I think I've never called myself a filmmaker because I'm too afraid that once I do, then I'll sort of be found out, So I think I tippy-toe around the idea of calling it a vocation, and I keep saying that it's an accident or that it's not mine to own, because I'm deeply petrified that once I actually start making it a vocation, or I start really investing the time to become better at it, somehow that's the moment I'll know that I'm a fraud, And so I think more than anything, I like telling stories and helping people see their own story. I think more than anything, like helping point people to their own greatness.
So can I say that it's okay for you to not say that if you want to not say that? That we're not here just to observe your films and take something from them, but we are here to say yes to you in some way. Isn't that right? We're not just here to take, right? So again, back to my mother. I don't know why, but why not? She used to say, "I will add my faith to your faith." So you don't have to say that about yourself now. When the day comes that you're comfortable to do that, you will. But I will say that for you, and I will hold that for you. And so my faith will be added to yours in that. And in my enthusiasm, and again, I know I can speak for more than just myself, in our enthusiasm to see what comes next, again, that is not our wanting something from you that you should fear, but the great cloud of witnesses, those you want to be able to say, I know those people, I know that this person right here has my back in some way. So God bless you for being willing to tell the stories in this way, and we're with you on that. So any other questions, or you, sir? There's two more.
Hello, good evening. My name's Adam, and I work with a lot of high school students, and they, quite a few of them want to be filmmakers or screenwriting or things like that. And I was wondering, I've noticed in your films you have a good ability, ability to capture like raw human nature, I guess, in only 6 minutes or less. Is that something that's teachable, I guess? And if so, to what degree? That ability to capture human nature?
Yeah, I mean, I'm asked the question a lot because like the guys that I mentor, people that are inquiring about how to create films similarly, I always, and I'm not sure if it's the right advice, but I always suggest that they try to get honest with themselves first, so that their point of view or how they perceive the world or their lens can be more honest, because I think as filmmakers sometimes, as documentarians, we have certain intentions or certain goals for a film, and I think maybe I don't know, how do I say this? I think maybe the reason these films might touch a different chord or go just a little deeper is probably because I've come to the deep understanding that I'm very imperfect, and I need a lot of grace in my life, and sometimes walking that out in your day-to-day and beginning to understand yourself in a clearer way, sometimes helps the films that you create. I could be totally wrong.
You're right. Just always just look over here. And yes. Can you, while I'm thinking about it, your wife is here. Can we acknowledge her?
Wifey, in the back.
You know how important you are, my friend, to this process, because it's your sacrifice as well as his. All those hours, all that time, all those I can't sleep at night and being tortured by it. So I want you to know that you are seen in this moment. So,
She's losing her hair.
What's that?
She's losing her hair because of me.
How long do we have, Matt? Should we do another question or two? Okay, so let's do two more. Excellent. Hi.
Hi. I think I've always really been interested in how healing art can be, and creation, and how we can connect with God through art and through music and through film, and through the process of creating that doesn't seem accessible in any other way. And I noticed in your movies there's a lot of brokenness, but there's always that hope for wholeness also. So I was just wondering if, while you were making your movies, if you were making them almost like as an attempt to find wholeness in places of brokenness in yourself, and if God met you through the whole creation process.
Gosh, look at the time.
I know. I think you answered the question. I think you answered the question for sure. It's definitely, it's an act of worship for sure. But it's, I think a lot of people see these films, and especially in the commercial world, they're always seen as very dark and depressing, and they're labeled as, the sadder moments in life and the things we don't really want to have to deal with. Like, let's talk about what's aspirational. Let's talk about hope. Let's talk about what's good in life. Let's find the gratitude for things rather than focusing on things that are negative. This is some of the feedback I get sometimes, and I guess it's just been my experience that the closer I get to the pain, or the more I'm able to sit with the pain that's deep within me, the smaller it becomes and the more hope there is. And so I feel like what I've done through a lot of my childhood is I danced around the pain, I danced around the issues in my life and sort of created all sorts of things, ways to cope, ways to be more optimistic, but I never really addressed what was harder and sort of harder to look at within myself and the world around me. And I think the process of this this experience with filmmaking and life in general is the closer I go to a story about a girl that's struggling with cancer, not sure if she's going to make it, I come to find out that she really isn't living in fear at all. She feels closer to God than she's ever felt in her whole life, and she sees it as a blessing. And so immediately, this fear that I once had sort of evaporates. And so I think it's trying to get close to these things that I'm afraid of, and in the process of getting close to that pain or that fear, there's incredible freedom. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Hi, I'm Tyson Banks. I'm a second AC, and I feel kind of bad. These questions have been incredible, and so deep. But I want to talk about your collaborative aspect of filmmaking, and I actually discovered your work through following Chase Irvin, and I love his work, and I especially love it when you guys work together. It's really cool. So I just wanted to ask about how you first started working together and how you've developed that collaborative partnership.
So Chase is a real kindred spirit, and he asked me to have dinner with him, and I didn't know who he was. I didn't really know his real, and so I went out to dinner with him, and I think we spoke for 4 or 5 hours at the dinner table, and sort of fell in love with each other, and after that, we just kept talking about life, nothing to really do with filmmaking, which was surprising, and there was an opportunity that arose. The film we actually had to skip, but the film's called Remember, and there was a friend that was struggling with Alzheimer's, and I asked Chase if he'd come along for the journey, and it was a 2-day process. But in the midst of collaborating with Chase, I think he's literally probably one of the strongest talents we have in our generation as a DP. And so I think it's a total gift that he even would take the chance and work with me on certain projects. He intimidates me, So.
Cool, thank you.
I think we're getting
Wrapping
the bum's
up.
rush here. Wrapping it up is what I meant to say.
Thank you all so much. One more round of applause for Eliot and Laura Lee. Thank you. Thanks again to Real Spirituality, the Brim Center, and of course, Fuller Theological Seminary. One last thing to mention, if you are in the Fuller community and you are a filmmaker, then please see one of the leaders of Fuller Filmmakers, myself, Andrew in the back. Basically, if they've got like glasses on and a camera in their hand, guess what? They're filmmakers. So see one of us if you're interested in joining the group. We're going to do big events like this once a quarter, but we also want to do just some smaller community-oriented events. And so before we go, gosh, I was not going to read this, and then Eliot and Laura Lee kept talking, and I was like, oh, that's exactly, I'm going to read it. And so the term prophet came up a lot tonight, and I've been reading a book called The Prophetic Imagination. And it says yes, and by Walter Brueggemann, who will be here in February. She said something like that. It's not this year, but it's very soon. The riddle and insight of biblical faith is the awareness that only anguish leads to life, only grieving leads to joy, and only embraced endings permit new beginnings. Ecclesiastes said that there's a time to weep and a time to laugh, but Jesus says that those who mourn will be comforted. Only those who embrace the reality of death will receive new life. Implicit in this statement is that those who do not mourn will not be comforted, and those who do not face endings will not receive beginnings. The alternative community knows it need not engage in deception. It can stand in solidarity with the dying, for those are the ones who hope. I used to think it curious when saying people have to quote scripture on demand, someone would inevitably say Jesus wept. It was usually done as a gimmick to avoid having to quote a longer passage, but now I understand the depth of that verse. Jesus knew what we numb ones must always learn again, that weeping must be real because endings are real, and that weeping permits newness. His weeping permits the kingdom to come. And I think that watching these films, watching people at the end of their rope, helps me to see a kingdom just beyond the horizon. And you said something about your films being, you didn't want them to play in churches. You were making them in such a way that, they were real and they wouldn't play in churches. And all I could think of is, God, let our churches look more like your films. Because that is the kingdom of heaven. So go forth, eat cookies if there are any left. And thank you so much for coming this evening, and I hope you all see the kingdom of heaven.